Bananas are not berries, at least not social studiesly speaking, which is the only way that matters, unless you have an advanced degree in botany. So, I love fun facts. For instance, did you know great white sharks are not at the top of the food chain? Killer whales have been known to hunt great white sharks, bite their sides, and slurp out their livers. Now, I don't think I'm alone in liking fun facts. You cannot go an hour on Twitter or YouTube or Reddit without somebody sharing some little-known historical tidbit or scientific oddity. The problem is a lot of these are either poorly sourced or not sourced at all, which has led to an epidemic of bad fun facts. These are fun facts that are either patently false, partially false, or so misleading that they might as well be considered false. I think that saying a banana is a berry and a strawberry, technically speaking, isn't, falls very much in the last category. Let's talk about word definitions and word meanings. First, we have an object, and we give this object a name. Let's say book. We take a second object. We look at these two objects and we say they're rather similar. Let's call them both books. The meaning of books is now objects that are like these two things. Now let's come with a definition. A definition is not the meaning of a word, but it's an attempt to encapsulate the meaning in a sentence or two. Let's define book based on these shared characteristics, okay? We see that books are pages bound together. And I think that if I said that, a lot of you would nod your head and say, yes, that's what a book is. A book is pages bound together. That works as a definition. But, okay, here's the issue. What if I take this? A National Geographic magazine. Is this a book? Now you might be inclined to say, yes, it is a book. It's pages bound together. But I think we can understand enough that if somebody told you that they were reading a book yesterday and you said, what book were you reading yesterday? And they said, well, I was reading National Geographic. You'd be at the very least confused and you might roll your eyes. National Geographic, it may be pages bound together, but it's not a book. Or take this, an audiobook. Is an audiobook a book? Most people, I think, would say yes. An audiobook is a book, even though no pages. It's still considered a book. So our definition of pages bound together, we can see, was not a very good definition. And we can try to come up with more rules, but there's always going to be these strange edge cases. Like, is a letter a book? Now you might say, no, of course a letter's not a book. It's a letter. That's totally different. But think of the epistles in the Bible, say the book of Romans or the book of Jude. A letter written 2,000 years ago is considered a book. It's the book of Romans. It's the book of Jude. So many definitions fail to fully capture the true meaning of a word. Meanings are very bendy. They're very curvy, flexible. They have lots of gray area. They vary from person to person, place to place, time to time. But definitions are much more brittle. They're much more specific. They have very little gray area. In the everyday, this sort of lack of clarity is okay. We don't need to know specifically, scientifically speaking, what you mean with every sentence that you say. But in science, they're a bit more picky. They want to have specific definitions for their specific words. They don't want gray area or flexibility. They don't want you to be able to twist their words around into a knot. They want you to know exactly what they mean with everything that they say. So oftentimes they're going to define their own words, like with the word gravity. where gravity means something very, very specific, and everyone is going to give you the same definition or the same type of definition based on their understanding of, relativistic physics. Its meaning is its definition. But most of the time, they just borrow pre-existing words for pre-existing concepts, like the word water. When a scientist uses the word water, they mean basically the same thing we do. There might be a few bits of gray area here and there, but we understand that when a scientist says water, what they mean is this stuff, H2O, the stuff that comes out of your tap. Those scientists might also use a word like illiterate. When I use the word illiterate, what I mean is that somebody cannot read or write. But when a scientist uses the word illiterate, what they mean is that somebody cannot read or write to the extent that they can get by in everyday life without accommodation. Our definitions are very similar, but the scientific definition is more broad. So when I read a number and I see that X% of people in the United States are illiterate, I will misunderstand their true fact because I have a different meaning in my head of the word. It's a close meaning, but it's not the same, and it will lead to confusion. Let's talk about tomatoes. Are tomatoes a fruit or a vegetable? Most of you, I would expect to say, scientifically speaking, tomato is a fruit. It makes sense that a tomato is a fruit. It's round, it's red, it's sweet and juicy. You could just take a bite out of it, just like an apple. And the scientific definition of a fruit is basically the stuff around the seeds and also the seeds inside of the stuff around the seeds. So we've got the tomato seeds and we got the tomato around it. Tomato's a fruit. It's a little bit more technical than that, but that's the gist. Now, this definition is fine for tomatoes. We can accept that a tomato is a fruit. But what also falls into the botanical definition of a fruit are pumpkins, cucumbers, peppers, olives, avocados, corn. And there comes the problem. If somebody asked, hey, can you bring a fruit salad to my potluck? And you brought them chopped up avocados and pumpkins with olives and corn sprinkled on top, they would be very annoyed. And you would not have the right to say, well, you asked for a fruit salad and technically this is a fruit salad, because that's not a fruit salad. That's just a regular salad. The cultural meaning of fruit, or the true meaning of fruit, as I would say, is much more flexible, unspecific, vague. There are a lot more special cases than would normally be allowed in a scientific definition. Now this brings us back around to the original example. Is a banana a berry? So a banana is a berry, botanically speaking, but the botanical definition should only be used in botany and not in popular discourse because it is so far removed from the popular definition. Now, before I move on, I will say that there are multiple botanical definitions for berry. The subclasses for fruit in botany are not standardized, so there's going to be a lot of disagreement between definitions. If you pick up 10 books, you're going to get 5 or 6 different definitions, probably. They all have a lot in common, and I'm going to use one of the simpler ones to explain. But note that my argument is going to work for any of these definitions. So, what is a berry botanically speaking? First, it has to be a fruit, a botanical fruit. Second, it has to be a fleshy fruit. Fleshy in this case means juicy, as opposed to something like peas. When you bite into a pod of peas, it's very dry and crispy, full of air. So can't be like a pea. Now it also can't be like a peach or a cherry. Those pits inside, pits are not found in berries. So it has to be fleshy, no pits. It has to be one object, one mass. So something like an orange where when you peel it open, it breaks apart into those slices, not allowed. Also a raspberry or a blackberry, how they have those little tiny balls of juice, and it almost looks like there's 100 berries all connected together, or the kernels on a cob of corn. These would be examples of things that would not be berries. Now, if you're paying attention, you might note that banana does match all of those criteria. So it is considered a berry. And as I said, raspberries and blackberries were eliminated. None of those things really matched strawberry, so you might be wondering about that. And the reason is because strawberries, pears, and apples are technically not fruit, botanically speaking. They're called accessory fruit, which is different and beyond the scope of this video. So the definition might cover a banana, sure, but also like a grape, a watermelon, a pumpkin, an avocado, a pepper, or an olive. So it isn't the same word that we use when we say berry. It's just a homonym. It's a related homonym. So saying a banana is technically a berry and a strawberry is technically not a berry is like saying Barack Obama was not our first black president, because this is black, and Barack Obama, he's just brown, like the other 44 presidents. So what is a berry then? Well, if we consult Nathan's very smart dictionary of very good definitions, we can find there's 3 criteria for a berry. 1, they have to be fruit, a cultural fruit, not a botanical fruit. 2, they have to be small. Most people should be able to hold at least 3 in their hand at one time. 3, it should have berry in its name. It's not that hard. The English language already did this for you. If a banana were a berry, it would be called a banana berry. And a strawberry, if it weren't a berry, would just be called a straw. So, in conclusion, berry, not a berry. Fruit, not a fruit. Book, not a book. And then this, which is whatever the heck you want it to be.